Labrīt visiem, kas ir pievienojušies šai tiešraidei. Mani sauc Ance Aboliņa, un es esmu SEB bankas inovāciju vadītāja, kā arī Izaugsmes programmas vadītāja no bankas puses. Jūs esat pievienojušies Izaugsmes programmas pirmajai lekcijai. Šo programmu mēs no bankas puses organizējam jau vairākus gadus. Un tā ir domāta mazo un vidēju uzņēmumu segmentam, lai palīdzētu viņiem veidot jaunas ambīcijas, lai dotu viņiem jaunas zināšanas par metodēm, rīkiem, kā arī iespēju satikties ar mentoriem, dažādiem sadarbības partneriem un kopumā apgūt daudz jaunu zināšanu, kuras var izmantot tālāk uzņēmumu attīstībā. Šajā gadā mēs arī paši no bankas puses sapratām, ka mums ir kaut kas jāmaina programmā. Un mēs likām uzsvaru uz kopradi, jeb co-creation. Arī šo pašu programmu mēs no bankas puses taisam sadarbībā ar Rethink un Catalyst Ventures. Un šīs programmas ietvaros mēs liksim uzņēmumiem iziet vēl vairāk ārpus komforta zonas un strādāt kopā, strādāt pāros. Šī programma, šī lekcija norisināsies angļu valodā, jo šodienas lektori mums ir no Somijas un no Igaunijas, tādēļ arī tā būs angļu valodā. Papildus es aicinu jūs uzdot jautājumus komentāros, iesaistīties, kurus tad arī pēc tam lekcijas beigās es varēšu uzdot lektoriem. Jana, Jussi, can I invite you to join?
Sure. Yes.
Hello.
So, I shortly introduced what is Growth Program about, but I hope you will be able to introduce you more yourselves and explain why co-creation, why is it important in innovations and for companies' growth as well. Okay. So, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, pleased to be here. Nice to meet you all. My name is Jussi, and I'm one of the two speakers today, sharing the stage with my colleague.
Jana.
Yes.
I was kind of hoping you remember my name, but...
Yes. But fortunately, it's typed here.
Hi, my name is Jana. I come from Estonia, and my role today is relatively modest. I will be commenting of some of Jussi's points, but I will be with you once again in 2 weeks in a more extensive manner. Yeah. And here we are to kick off the program and to give you the context a little bit, sharing our experiences. And I think it's important to say about both Jussi and me, and Lena actually, that we are mostly practitioners. So doing lectures is definitely not our main job. And everything we will be sharing today is mostly coming from the practice and the experiences and the projects that we do on sort of day-to-day basis.
That's fair. Yes. I will be only meeting you today during the course of this program. And so I'm a guest lecturer, if you may. And my main topic, what I do for a living, what I've done for now more than 25 years, is work with companies on innovation strategies and innovation execution. That's not what I kind of signed up for, but it's what I ended up doing anyhow, because that's what companies really needed to do. And it's my job to kind of kickstart a little bit the spark in you on how to get the program rolling. But we have a lot of things to cover. We have 2 hours to do it. It's going to be awesome, exhausting, and also there are going to be questions. And with the questions, what I would need you to do is not to be shy about them. Just put your hand up and ask away. I will repeat the question and then think of whether I can answer it today. Because nothing is more useless in the world than having a lecture that doesn't have a point. So it needs to have value to you. But we have a few items with Jana that we'd like to address first. Our day-to-day is split into 3 parts. I'm going to talk about why is innovation mandatory? Why is innovation work, why it needs to be done in companies of all sizes, if you may. Then, obviously, we're going to somewhat address the framework for co-creative innovation. What is it about? How do we do that? And how does kind of co-creation come into play? Because that's actually at the heart of the entire program that you will be running. And then talking about the main directions set by both of these. So, like a 3 parts, 3 key things. Maybe the first hour we'll spend here, and the latter hour in 2 parts, here on points 2 and 3. And then in the afternoon, you get to practice some of the items already, but just a bit. But you will unfortunately need to keep these 2 things in your mind and on your notes through all the program. Or then reach me via email later. But before we dive in onto the items, I will give that to Jana for a couple of detailments.
I think before we start of the whole journey of talking about innovation, because it's kind of a cheesy term these days in business environment. Everybody talks about innovation everywhere. I think it's somewhat important to agree on what we mean by that when we talk about here today. So, any expectations in the sense of when you join the innovation program, what did you expect innovation to be? How do you define it for yourself? Any thoughts? I'm sure you expected something out of innovation program. So when we typically talk about innovation in books, in business, sort of kind of textbooks, we talk about solving a problem, the old problem in a new way, right? So that is kind of the typical explanation to it. In the day-to-day lingo, so when you kind of read about it in Harvard Business Review or watch some video on YouTube, it's generally accompanied with some visuals of robots and aliens taking over or something like that. So it's usually a very epic attitude that we imagine when we talk about innovation. Just to sort of settle the tone, this is not exactly how we perceive it. It's not necessarily inventing something that has not been present before in the world in general. It's not something that is super high-tech and super expensive to execute. We're looking at innovation from a bit different perspective in this particular program. So if you look at these logos here, I think fairly all of them are somewhat innovative, or we perceive them somewhat innovative. Potentially, in the next program, I'm hoping to include a logo of somebody present here in the room at the moment. But let's kind of think a bit for a second, what is the innovation in these companies actually about? Did they invent anything as such? Not quite. I mean, taxis have been available long before Bolt, right? We were watching TV long before Netflix. We were listening to music and paying for music long before Spotify, right? So they did not come up with something groundbreaking. However, what they did do, well, this one we also did before. Somehow we managed, right? I have no idea how. But what they changed is they changed how we do it. So in the context of this program, and why we're looking at co-creation, and co-creation not just between companies, but co-creation with customers, is we're looking at a little bit shifting the behavior of customer and giving them some more handy, convenient, contemporary ways to do the things that they have always been doing, that have always been there on the surface, so to say, accessible and needed. But we're hoping to somehow change the behavior in a way that it becomes different from what it's always been so far. And hopefully that also provides a new source of revenue of companies present here. Why we want you guys to team up?
There is a question.
Yeah, I saw that. So why we want you guys to team up for this, we'll explain that along the Go Today keynote, why this changing behavior requires a bit of co-creation between different companies on the go. But I'm happy to see that there was a hand up.
I just wanted to make one small remark. I would also include availability, that innovation make it more available to everyone.
Absolutely. So the comment there was that innovation provides accessibility and availability for customers that maybe didn't reach to the solution before. So indeed, that becomes it easier, right? And simple, and also maybe to some points more affordable in some cases, right? Something that used to be luxury becomes more affordable to broader masses. So I think there is a lot of angles to innovation that do not necessarily require rocket science. And this is what this 6 weeks, 8 weeks will be about. All right, so I'm handing back to Jussi.
Thank you. Thank you, Jana.
So deep dive.
Yeah. Yes, inclusion is very much at the heart of innovation. And I think that this is kind of key for us now in the beginning, or for you to kind of grasp, is that not all innovation needs to lead new massive services here and there, these kinds of things. It can be an incremental change, but still how people perceive it. How your customers and new customers perceive how your service will be changed or your products will be changed, or how they differ from the ones that are in the market is kind of crucial. But for that, let's dive into the topic of why is it mandatory? And I'll start from quite far. The history of any kind of company nowadays has its roots in the technological revolution. Because this is when the shape of our basic organization was born. And guess what? Almost every single company nowadays follows the same logic, the same hierarchy, the same set of rules that was created for a singular purpose, to produce physical goods. Which of you work in an industry where the end product is physical? Let me see a show of hands. Great, awesome. About almost half of you. This is going to be super productive for you guys, because there are going to be probably, if you work in large organizations, I'm going to touch on some pain points. Let's see if they resonate. But also, if you pair up with companies whose products are not physical, you're going to get a lot out of this. You're also going to feel that these people know nothing of how a thing is done. So utilize that to an extent. But the problem is that organizations that produce physical goods are not necessarily very great at creating services. It's really difficult for them, actually, because your end product is a physical thing, and actually your sales is geared towards physical things, and everyone understands physical things and storage and these kinds of things. But the minute you would move on to Spotify's, Tinder's, Netflix's, which is a service, then suddenly business models change and everyone is more or less unhappy. When organizations started after the Industrial Revolution to become established and started to grow, all organizations start to exhibit typically 3 core problems. And I'll be going through the core problems to kind of, for you to gain an understanding of why innovation work is really mandatory. Here, the core 3 problems are illustrated by this awesome GIF, where you can see that even if your organization has 3 separate problems, they all live their own lives, the problems, and they start to impact one another. They start to hit one another and cause new kinds of problems again. I was happy to steal this graph from the 3-body problem series, where this kind of happens, that everything becomes a tumble and they all hit one another. Why these 3 problems? Like I said earlier, I have been working with innovation for about 25 years of my career. And I've worked with companies, global companies, local companies in Finland, and also like local companies who want to kind of push their product out onto the internet for everyone to access. And at any point in time, organizations tend to exhibit these three problems, and they are not in any way gotten out of a textbook. They are what I've experienced them to be. So this is my theory. So I would categorize problems into three, with a fourth one emerging someplace near future, but still, that's still a hot debate between me and Jana. Let's start with the first one. So silos. Silos within organizations, we probably all know. Which one of you, when I mention companies and silos, has like, yeah, I've been there? Let me see a show of hands. At least one person. Okay, let's dive in on what does this mean? What does siloed organization mean? And I'll give an example. This is a company that I work with, or a customer of mine. This is a well-known operator in Finland, highly profitable, producing everything that we would expect our mobile operator to produce. And they have, guess what, adjoining services next to the mobile packages that all of us are using on our mobile phones. Books, streaming services, whatnot, everything. But the way the company is executed or done on a company level is that each and every business unit is an individual. That makes them fast, and that makes you as their customer and you as the other customer of their other business unit, you're both kind of done in an optimal manner. But guess what? Your data is not talking to one another, because every single thing that they did, all the 7 business units had their own business systems. And the systems wouldn't talk to one another. Because why would they? If your business is beneficial, highly profitable, he comes in and says that, so is mine, but let's do something together. The inevitable question is, why? Why would you work together? To create new opportunities. Yeah, but what's the cost of that? All of my calculus is in the green. So here we have a company that is highly profitable, has 7 business units, but the business units' data is not talking to one another. And how we, as their customers, feel is represented by this. No one at the company has a 360 view on what their customers' lives or needs are. And we, as the customer, have 7 different sets of sign-ins. And it cannot recommend me if I read a book using their service, Ian McEwan's Enduring Love. It will not recognize this and recommend me to watch the movie with the same title, because the data is not talking to one another. It's blocking me from achieving the next level of experience and blocking them from getting the next level of customerhood. So siloed organizations that do things isolated and with blindfolds on, making sure that it's only profitable, are missing out on building the next level. And this is blocking them from innovating. Now, the example of a corporate siloed world. Who has now a more familiar feeling about silos, has experienced this in their career in one way or the other? No one. You're all human beings, that's great. So, large organizations tend to exhibit this problem. Let's talk about the next one. The next one is detachment. That's actually also a deadly sin, if you may. And I'll give an example of this one as well. I worked with a well-known Nordic global networks provider. They've grown into a giant. They have a facility or a house or whatever, a factory with a name on it in probably almost every single capital in Europe, at least. You would know the name. They supply systems, devices, software. In a sense, they produce the artery against which any society, modern society, kind of works in. But their clients do feel that their products are super old-fashioned. Like, there's something, whenever I submit a request to them, it's like, it's not quite there. Actually, not at all there. We're just using them because they're reliable. And when I and my team worked with their top management. The top management kept on telling me that the innovation is not rapid enough. We're not coming up with new services, not nearly fast enough to kind of get there. And when I spoke with the middle management, they said that, well, the process for innovation is hostile, that I can't really take anything up here and to expect that to be executed onto or somehow acted on. So I and my team who are doing this research for them is like, okay, so everyone is really hating their own company. Why? And we found out absolutely no one knew what the end users think. I found absolutely no people at the organization who knew what the end users of their products would be thinking. And after a little bit of digging, what we found was this. The designers were second to last in the sales process, and I highlight the problem. If you there are the prospective end customer wanting to buy something, you're the salesperson, so you two talk to one another, and you tell him what you really need. Yeah, just tell him. And then you as the salesperson go to the delivery person here and tell that this is what the customer said. But you are in charge of actually the software and the hardware products. So you decide that this is actually both the hardware and the software problem. You tell these two people what she said. And this is the problem. Now you two respective line heads are going to tell these two people because they run the teams. And this is the designer who designs the thing that she ordered. Guess what? You had never, ever in your career at this network giant ever met a customer face-to-face, live. You hadn't even spoken to them because it's scary. Really scary. Imagine what would happen if you would go and talk to her. You would endanger their jobs. Yeah. So this is what happens. When we moved her to work with you, with your blessing, you got a lot happier. So detachment means that if you don't know what your end user thinks, you're kind of missing out. And those people, the customers at the end, were just feeling like, I tried to order this from you like half a year ago. What's wrong with you people? And that was what was wrong. So sometimes fixing an item is as simple as this. Guess what? A human problem, but also an organizational problem. You guys particularly were not at all happy about me meddling with how you deliver your goods and services. Like I said, even the designers didn't know what the customers wanted or needed. Customers were complaining every time that something was delivered to them that this is so close to what I ordered, but not nearly there. Yeah, because there's 7 sets of hand-me-downs. Everything that this company does was driven by Excel. I'm not saying that Excel is bad. I'm saying that it's good at pointing directions, but it's a really lousy steering wheel. Let's talk about the third big bucket of difficulties that innovation aims to solve. So this is slow failing, which is funny. And this is probably the most familiar to those of you who have done a long stint in a company or worked long in the same place, if you may. I was working with a large bank. Now we're talking about a really large bank. And they gave me and my team, we won a task to redesign their digital brand presence. And we argued that for that we need to have access to physical touch points, the branch offices and so on, to kind of see how that would mirror or echo the experience in the physical touch points as well. So we began a really big project. We were renewing their website, their organizational, like matching data structures, how people sign in, and the online bank. Not just in terms of visuals, but how they act, how they behave, how they feel. So this was a magnanimously big undertaking. And all these projects, to speed them up, to accelerate a bit, all the projects were running in parallel. So they were doing the website at the same time as they were doing the bank and as we were doing the brand renewal and also the touch-ups on the branch offices, on how that's visible over there. We had multiple vendors, several companies running with this and so on and so on. But then, again, these evil managers here in the middle, I'm sorry, but you're just kind of handily there. Trying not to be the bad guys through all the session. As the projects grew, we started to get more and more feature requests from these people, which is great, because everyone had a bucket of wishes. And now let's turn you from the customer onto the CEO. Yes, finally. You said yes, because you want to keep these people happy. They're your core people. Yes, all the requests, fine. And the projects got bigger and bigger and bigger. And me and my team were struggling to deliver and so on and so on. But luckily, we were only doing the brand. But the timelines grew from 1 year to launch to 3 years. Let's make the best online bank in the world. And we were cautioning against it, but the customer said, yes, we want to do this. All the project streams, every single one, the website, the online bank, the branch office renewal, every single one of them was successful in terms of the Holy Excel. They were delivered in time, as scheduled, as thought, in budget, according to the reporting principles. Everyone was good. That's great, isn't it? No, it's not. Guess what? During the last year, every single competitor launched more better advanced services, which were better received by the customers. Why? They contained not more, but less. They contained less features, but they were nicer to use. The features in them were perhaps not so crucial for the end customers than you guys thought, or you thought, or we thought. But the core of the thing is that they were too slow. So it's possible to do things so that you're doing the right things, but you're doing them so slowly that actually it's this lack of speed that's going to kill your business. It's not the communication, it's the wrong calls to make in terms of scope. And actually that is highly detrimental. Who has witnessed this slowness in one part or some part of their career? Welcome to my focus group. Yeah. This is how it goes. These are the 3 core problems that I see emerging in companies of various sizes and shapes, but they are typically more prevalent in companies that are already established and big. And it's like someone commented early on, how do you do things differently? How do you revamp the way that you work or your organization works? So the audience for innovation is not necessarily only your customers. It's probably, for many of you, it can be the way your company is internally organized. Who does what and how is it done? And that might make you faster. As these core problems started to become recognized and become stable, companies started to work on methods to kind of work around these items. Obviously, we're humans. We can't do failing for a long time. So we want to circumvent them somehow. We want to find a way to fix the organization or the problems or the business items. And that draws us to one of the conclusions of today. Who has seen this graph before? That is great, because then this is going to be of real value to you. This is what's called the Design Value Index. And it's a study done for 10 years of financial data on Standard & Poor's top 500 companies. And it was run with a singular purpose, to identify whether there is a core differentiator in companies that are really great at doing stuff and kind of who constantly outperform their competitors. And here are some of the companies: Apple, Coca-Cola, Ford. We can identify the names. But the core was to identify if these companies have some kind of a secret source, and if that source can be identified to come from design-oriented methods. And in order to not to be biased, this was done on a very high level and taking into account 10 years of data. Now let's split the companies into two groups. The black line is the rest of Standards & Poor's top 500. The red line is the companies who use design-centric methods in their research and development work. And on average, they outperform their competition by more than 200% in terms of revenue. This is a major, major item. Imagine outperforming your competition in whichever industry you are in by more than 2 times over. You can find this research online by Googling up Design Value Index. Not right now, please, but later. But type it down somewhere, because you will arrive at this graph. And this study was then, because we could argue now, this is almost 10 years old, 2015. McKinsey then returned to this study in 2018 and 2020 to kind of find if some of the items are true. There's a quote later on these slides by Jana linking to the 2018 study. But this was turnkey to some of the service design professionals such as ourselves, myself, Jana here today, because this is what we work on. And to many, and to us as well, during the purposes of this program, this gap is what innovation is about. What is the 200% increase here? Let's stop with that a bit. A question to all of you. What is the main, in this light, in the light of the 3 core magnanimous problems and the design value index that I just showed you, what is the main benefit of innovation work? Why is it crucial? I'm giving you now about 1 minute to think. And I can do the song and dance here in the meanwhile so that it's entertaining for the people online. But 1 minute to think. Starting now, starting 15 seconds ago. Why is it crucial? What's the main benefit? What could be the main purpose behind the 200% gap? Yes, it's a loaded question. And I'm going to warn you that I'm going to single people out and ask. Okay, 45 seconds is enough. What do you think?
Make a business in a much more different way.
Make business in a different way.
In a different way and more effective way.
More effective way. Okay, great. What about you? How do you feel?
Well, you need to innovate if you want to grow faster.
Innovate if you want to grow faster. Great.
I think innovation helps to solve those 3 problems, and it makes people to work in teams, because you cannot innovate alone.
So innovation exists to kind of make people collaborate better, work in teams, and solve the 3 problems, kind of overcome the key instances of that. Okay. Anything else? Anyone wants to add voluntarily?
Customer needs.
Customer needs, yeah. To really understand the customer. Good. Starting to warm up. Getting there. Yep. One more.
The ease of clients, satisfy the client, and so
Client satisfaction.
client satisfaction.
Yes, to enhance that and so on and so on. Yeah. All very good. All very good. And all kind of sub-terms to what we are obviously after with this. Because the main benefit, why is it crucial? you all answered why is it crucial, because those are crucial items for a business to solve. But the real reason, and the singular reason, when you dig far enough into this question, you will arrive at the same conclusion, is speed. These companies are able to deliver products and goods faster to the customers than the competition. It's this simple. It's really this simple. That's the only reason why they outperform their competition. Okay, we can break it into subparticles. The products and goods are likely to be more desirable to the customers. They are likely to be done in a more efficient way. Someone said teams, working with people, so on and so on. But it's all about getting to the right item faster than without. So compressing a bit. This concludes like the history part, so that you get the mandatories of why we must do this. For each of you, your business surroundings are different. And it might be sometimes difficult to relate to the high and mighty seeming problems of organizations. Now, I'm going to use, again, the same metaphor. Same metaphor that I've used a couple of times during the past 2 days. But for some of you who represent smaller companies, innovation is a must in a different way, because you don't have so many resources. You need to succeed. For big companies, this is what I think Jana is particularly good at, and you might want to tease her on this topic. But for established companies, the slowness can become from the fact that you already have resources. So you who represent smaller entities, you're much more agile because you have to make it. For bigger instances, you don't necessarily need to. The framework that we use to uncover the speed is called design thinking. How many of you have heard the term design thinking before? 4.5 people, that's great. I'm using the term because I need you to be able to Google up the right thing later. So design thinking is at the heart of what we do, or what you will be doing inside this program. I also prefer other terms for it, accelerated co-creation, these kinds of things. It's the same thing. But design thinking is the main mechanism behind that 200% gap. And to understand that, we'll dive in a bit. Design thinking is not a new thing. It's actually super old. Well, super old. It's like 1990s old. It was coined by Tim Brown, the founder of IDEO. And I'm not reading the quote to you, because guess what? You can all read. But it's made of understanding, or the viewpoint, that any given problem should be solved by investigating it through these 3 lenses: feasibility, viability, and desirability. Where feasibility, in a rough nutshell, means, is this technically viable? Can we do this in the way of technology or organization? For those of you who come from the manufacturing industries, this is like probably how you are approaching things. And your main partner with that is typically, is there business in it? The viability part. Like is there a business case in this one that I'm driving? So can we do it? Should we do it? But the best part of design thinking, and the newest part, this is how most businesses are run. Utilizing the top 2 buckets of here, and then as a side note saying that, yeah, then someone will buy it. Great. Who's the someone? I've got no idea, but they're loaded. Yeah, they're going to buy it in masses and we're going to be stinking rich. How do we know this? I don't know. Marketing, yes. Then we put all into marketing automation, and guess what? Sometimes it works.
Sometimes.
Yes, sometimes it works. It doesn't work every time, but sometimes it works. Design thinking, as a differentiator from the other methods, always begins with people. Let's find a way to approach any of the items that we see in the surroundings of what we do from the point of view of people, and then only later on in the process figure out how the hell are we going to, pardon my French, are we going to execute this? And then only after that figure out, is there any business in it? And cherry on top, let's learn to do this cycle really fast. How fast can you think that you would be able within your business to execute a cycle like this? Find something, figure out if you can build it, and figure out if there's a business case to it. Anyone? Just a rough toss, at your workplace. Week? Great. You're hired. 7 years? Heated discussion? Year. You can see the divisioning. 1 week, year. Think how indicative this is to our workplaces. You're both correct. Neither of you is wrong. Why is this design thinking important? It's a fast way, a human-centric way, to create new products, services, processes, and approaches. And notice, I wanted to pull this in because with design thinking, you also can design processes. Why are processes important? For those of you looking a way to innovate within an existing sphere, within your existing workplace, design thinking can be used to rethink on how you do your business. And that leads you to be probably faster. When you're faster, your customers will be more happy. When you're faster, you will deliver goods and services faster. And without major changes to your organizations, new hires, you might be actually making more revenue. All comes down to money. Who has seen this honeycomb picture before somewhere? You're excluded. Okay. This is the basic shape of a design thinking system. Consists of 5 steps. Emphasize with something or with someone, hopefully without not interfering, but just like looking at how people behave, perhaps interviewing them, and so on and so on. From that data, finding out what's the core problem. Around this core problem, ideate different solutions on how could we solve this in whatever it is that we saw. To produce a viable prototype of it, the solution. And bringing the prototype back to the person that we originally emphasized with to test and fix and repeat and so on and so on. Design thinking in its purest form revolves around these 5 steps. Go someplace, observe what's happening, what is happening, define from that, and so on and so on and so on. I will give an example because it makes it easier. For the longest of time, almost 10 years, I have been working with a company known across the world, all bar North America, who works in textiles and so on and so on. You step onto their products every day when you walk into a store that has a carpet, that has a decided brand on it. And many of the employees might be wearing uniforms made by the same company. Now, as part of onboarding, or what I wanted to do is to examine how their products are being used. At the ground floor of a really big-ass mall in Finland, they have a locker where people are supposed to return the used clothes. And after their shift is over, they return their clothes over there, and so on and so on. So it has 3 different holes in it: shirts, trousers, and something, caps maybe. So I had a chair, and I was sitting in front of that locker for 3.5 hours, observing how people were using it. Guess what? Almost no one hit the things. It was just like, here's my shirt. It sometimes hit one of the holes, and sometimes it didn't, because they were not labeled clearly enough. They were labeled this small text. So when they're in a rush to go home, they don't really want to read. So it went onto the wrong hole, and this times a gazillion points across all over the planet, where the return booths are all the same, led to a loss of thousands of work hours. Tiny incremental change from this text to this big shirts, illustrated also with a picture of a shirt, and then pick up better. That's emphasizing. From that data, defining how to make it better, from ideating, and then how we prototyped it. We just replaced the stickers in that same store and calculated the amount of hours again. And then we were able, from that, to produce a business case to the customer, replacing, retouching in this way all of the lockers globally, affecting thousands of units already deployed at the customers. It still made sense. Tiny, tiny thing to do. This is at the heart of what I think that you should be doing in this program. This is at the heart of what I think that you should execute. You should be prototyping. You should be testing this on people. And to cherry on top, you should be testing it right. Many of us, let's say that you make a killer prototype. That's awesome. I'm trusting on you. When we make a prototype, then you give it to him for testing. You're going to ask, isn't it great? No, you're going to be, we can't say anything, because we don't want to tell him that's great. We want him to tell you that this is great, because at that point it's not biased. So doing the testing right is also really difficult for us human beings. So I'm trying to ignite a spark in you to start and rethink items this way. Any questions or comments this far by anyone? Particularly questions? I know it's all theory. No? Yeah.
If my customers are businesses, business-to-business case.
B2B?
Yep.
Yeah. This is, believe it or not, equally easy. Yeah. When you work B2B, they actually love this, because you might want to, depending on your industry, you might want to work on this in a manner that, hey, let's figure out what your customers want. If you are the vendor who helps your customers to understand their customers better through a chain like this, they will never let you go hard. Anything else? It's equally applicable. You just need to understand that you're affecting things a bit differently, either looking at their target or then affecting the business process that they're making. Anyone else? Okay, no worries. You've got 8 weeks to mull on this topic, if you may. Now, is this novel? Is design thinking only meant for strange, creative service designers like myself and Lene and Jana? No. I'll give you a really big example of a company or an instance running design thinking at the heart of their process, at the basis of the Standards & Poor's or the Design Value Index. This is SAP. So each and every company can have their own implementation of a design thinking process. It's much likely, or it has semblance to the original 5 steps. But with SAP, it's people, processes, and place. So you can see that for SAP, it's internal to what SAP does. They want to identify how their customers, people, what they want to do, begins with people. What's the process of how they do it, and what's the context on where it's done. This is relevant for SAP. If you're in a different industry, particularly manufacturing industry, you might want to consider the same kind of way. If we're delivering something like a physical good for an end product, Who are these people? What's the process of where our end product is used? What's the context of that process? And so on and so on. It might be applicable. Just to give you an understanding that it's not just like hippies doing design work. It's actually really viable for businesses. So, design thinking, it's an approach to innovate and solve problems. That's what you need to remember. It's a strategic tool for those of you sitting in positions where you can affect the way your company does things. Take it into heart, take it into action, and I guarantee you one thing, you will gain market advantage if you're persistent about it. It allows you to revamp the approaches that you do. No matter what your industry is, it's a very good tool to kind of examine whether you're doing the right things or whether you're doing things right. It's really good for change management. For the established companies here present, it's a way to solve that. We've always had this problem. We've always had these internal struggles, and now it's time to end these. It's a very good tool to redo parts of your organizational structure. But within the context of this program, the last part is key. It allows you to go from abstract to tangible. Abstract problem, tangible outcome because of the importance and kind of mandatory prototyping. So that's one thing. But let's take another viewpoint so that you don't only have to listen to me. I'll hand the floor over to Jana to give you some tangible examples of items and contradict many of the things that I said.
Well,
Thank you, Jana.
thank you for handing over. So actually, listening to Jussi just now, I was having multiple flashbacks to the early days of calling myself a service designer. So back, I don't know, 15 years ago or something, when I started using the term design thinking or service design in front of C-level managers of large business organizations, the most typical reaction was them making different faces, clearly not very happy ones, and saying, like, you know, we're not going to do that probably because this sounds very esoteric. It sounds very fluffy. And it sounds kind of, we have this expression in Estonian, I'm not sure if that translates here as well, but it's kind of a tree-hugging thing, you know, giving the vibe of this nothing to do with business environment. Which in essence, I think, is I agree that the pair of design thinking is, I personally prefer design doing, to be honest. Not just thinking, but actually taking some action as well. But it's interestingly, it has this kind of context to it that might not convey the actual point. I hope listening to Jussi, you actually got the idea that it's about facing the customer. It's not about design. It's not about how it looks so much. It's a nice kind of side effect of the solution being attractive and pretty. But it's mostly about developing something that is customer-oriented, customer-centric. And when you put it that way, and you argument that, well, the whole idea of this exercise is to develop something that your customer actually likes enough to be willing to pay more money absolutely voluntarily. Now that sounds a lot more attractive, right? So my personal preference, I gave up on using term design thinking and service design at some point because I simply saw that it does not resonate to many business audiences. And I started using customer centricity instead. And you know what? By now, I think if you ask at any organization, this is now the peer pressure kicking in. If you ask at any organization regarding, is it business, is it public sector, whatever it is, if you ask them, are you customer centric? Everybody is like, yes, we are. Because nobody would tell you that, no, we are like very self-oriented. We don't care about the customers and like absolutely not our thing. So everybody is at least in their words, oriented towards customer. But we're here to talk about innovation. Can innovation really be customer driven? So we have been talking today a lot about what innovation is, what is it for. Let me ask you, what does it start from? What does typically innovation start with in real life? Not in books, but in real life. Strugglings? Yes. The problem thing, it's typically more the theoretical approach, I would say. This is what we hope innovation would start with solving a problem. However, as a consultant, very often in reality, I find that the problem might come slightly later. And it might be somewhat artificial. Because very often, in like 80% of cases, when companies start to innovate, there's something else behind it.
And my own experience?
Own experience and own idea. Because you, as company owner, manager, or employee, came up with something that you thought might be beneficial. So it's not coming from the customer, it's not coming from anywhere, and we end up realizing our own ideas. And typically as humans, we have this little flaw of falling in love with our ideas and not with anybody else's. So this is the fundamental reason why when innovating, very many companies, even though they claim to be customer-oriented, their version of customer orientation is aggressively imagining customer in the meetings. You know, you come together with your colleagues, you close up in a meeting room, and then you kind of talk to each other what the customer might look like. So that's not exactly how we mean it when we talk about customer-driven innovation. And it is absolutely understandable that in many cases, when you already have the idea for what should be done, and you're fairly convinced that it's a good idea, there's no more point in going anywhere and talking to anyone because, well, you already have it. So that is kind of the problem of very many innovations that don't succeed because they were never actually validated or they never originated from where they're supposed to. And sometimes it flies. Because, well, let's face it, sometimes we are lucky of guessing whatever market might need, and sometimes we actually experience maybe a problem that several other customers like us might be experiencing. However, it will not be very successful model for replicating, in a sense, because what Jussi was showing you earlier, it's a process of design that is, I would say 99% fail-proof, in a sense. If you follow it to the core, then it kind of delivers the result in the end. If you just rely on your own ideas, well, it's a not even 50-50 chance. I think it's like fairly less chance of success in the end. And, well, companies avoid talking to customers for another reason as well. Have you, by the way, tried talking to your customers ever? Asking for feedback, stuff like this. How did it go? Tell me. Yes. How did it go? Like, what kind of insights did you get from customers? Were they useful?
We test our product, new product, or new, well, it's a food, it's easier.
It's easier to test food, I agree. Do you like it?
Make the degustations in the different places or
Yeah.
in exhibitions.
So testing out,
Yes.
but the product is already there, so you're kind of already validating. So you made the effort, right? And even, but even,
Then you get the feedback, what is good for them and they like, or what would be the suggestions from them to improve.
so gathering suggestions and gathering maybe in form of either questionnaire or sending something out. And there is a problem with that method that I'm pretty sure you experienced as well, especially with food, I imagine. I don't have I have an experience as a consumer, but, well, not as much maybe with the developing food product. If you start asking people about what they think about certain products or services, it pretty quickly becomes evident that it's a 50-50 split. There's 50% of people saying, this is awesome. I want one of those. And then there's another half that would go, this is the most horrible thing I tasted in my life. Never, please don't bring it to market. This is terrible. And then you're like, okay, so what do we do, right? And this is exactly the reason why companies don't talk to customers, because nothing good ever comes out of it. And then furthermore, if you ask for suggestions, like you reach out to a customer, you're like, okay, so tell us what we could do better. And then you go and implement all these suggestions directly from the feedback form into your product, service, solution, then you might end up with something that looks like that. So that is, I think, the visual representation. It's not AI generated, by the way. It's a real thing. It used to exist. I think this is a visual representation of this famous quote that Henry Ford, by the way, never said, that if he would ask his customers what they wanted, they would ask for faster horses. So that is kind of the result of that. And I think it very clearly illustrates that in the process of innovation, we have to be very smart about the customer centricity that we execute. And this is where the design framework comes to help. So we cannot ask straight for suggestions. You cannot ask for solutions from the customers because they have no freaking idea. We can ask them about where it hurts, but we cannot ask them which kind of medicine would they want, if you get the metaphor. So the complexity for companies that comes into the innovation process is that we very often get this false feeling of security, where we ask customers for suggestions, and then multiple customers give us similar ideas or similar feedback, and we feel that, okay, this is what customer actually wants. And then I'm sure plenty of you have the experience when you have leaned on that and you have developed what they wanted, you brought it to market, and then nobody wanted it as a result. And the problem with that is that, nobody of us, including our customers, is able to predict the future. So they don't know what they want. They don't really, they don't really know what is possible and what would be the optimal way of solving the problem, because they are not professionals in the field, right? Because I think that the medical example here is the most relevant one. You're not going to well, of course, in the age of Google, many of us are, but this is not the best way to do it. So we're actually going to the doctor, explaining the problem, right? And the doctor applies professional competence, providing the solution. And this is how it should work in the innovation process. However, even the best of us do the mistake of asking the customers for the wrong thing. I mean, it wouldn't be an innovation seminar without having Steve Jobs on the screen, right? So I had to. And he's very famous for, for the iPod, for example, saying that you cannot ask customers for anything because they don't know what they want. You have to show them what they want. But we only, as I said, sometimes you might be lucky. And this is what we know about Apple. We know when they were lucky. Also, probably there was a bit more of empathy naturally happening there towards the market, a bit more ambition and so on. But there's plenty of stories of Apple, Amazon, Google, and all the famous companies alike that have not made it to the textbooks, where they have actually failed miserably because they just simply started with the idea and they were not following the whole kind of process in the correct way. And I think this one is a great example of not being truly customer-centric, but this kind of doing the show-off. So in 2003, that was the probably top years of iPods, if I'm not mistaken. So everybody was kind of, having the tiny little thing in the pocket. And Apple Music launched. And Steve Jobs was kind of claiming back in 2003 that, we've asked customers, they don't want to rent music. Have you heard anything about Apple Music recently? I think they were very successfully killed. Well, they still exist, but nobody uses it pretty much. So you do? No? Back to different. All right. So you're still the old school. Do you have? Probably you also have some CDs at home. No.
No. Let's not go there. It's a can of worms.
Okay. But we kind of all know what happened to music industry, to movies, to everything, right? So we all switched to renting. But again, if somebody asked you, what year was Gmail launched? Whatever year that was, long time ago. If somebody asked you a month before that, saying, what do you think if I give you an unlimited email account, but in return, I'm going to scan your emails automatically for keywords, and I'm going to suggest advertising to you based on that? You would have said that this is an awful invasion of privacy and claimed that you would never use that. How many of you have a Gmail account? There we go. So the customer centricity exercise is extremely complicated because of that, because it requires a certain framework to actually innovate in customer-centric manner, to be able to figure out the needs and to be able to address these needs in most clever way, and not just kind of bouncing the ideas of the customer and hoping that, if you just do whatever they tell you, it works. So now we get to the point of the program, because why we're contributing this much time into the context of the whole thing is to kind of set the mood for the co-creation between the companies that's going to happen here. So why we're investing into putting teams together from different companies of probably different backgrounds is because when you look at customer experiences and customer problems, and you really kind of try to map them in a decent scale, not just kind of very narrow focusing on the product, what you will see very quickly, and I think if you as a customer or of any service pretty much, if you reflect on yourself, you will also agree that we never experience isolated services. So let me illustrate that. So a few years ago, we were working with Tallinn Airport. And Tallinn Airport was trying to improve the customer journey. They were mapping the journey first, trying to understand how does a traveler experience the whole thing. And when we started mapping, so the first touch point, when you're going on vacation, you're arriving to airport, let's say by Bolt taxi. And you were not particularly lucky that day. So the taxi driver maybe smells a little bit, is breaking the traffic rules, and has all these little minor details. So your first touch point of the journey is somewhat negative. And then Tallinn Airport goes like, yeah, but it has nothing to do with us. It's Bolt. It's not us, right? Okay, fine, next one. So you arrive, you go to the check-in counter, and there's a queue. And you have maybe a couple of kilos over the limit, and the girl is rude over the counter. So it's again, like somewhat not so great. And as a result, you're on the journey, you're again unhappy. And Tallinn Airport says, but this is not us. This is Air Baltic. That's like nothing to do with us. And so on. So the next checkpoint is security, which again is always iffy from everyone's experience, I suppose. Yusi can tell more about how he generally travels through security. He looks suspicious, you know, and it's like, look at him. Again, the airport says, this is not us, this is G4S. So, you know, you have as a customer, this is your vacation. This is one journey of your vacation. But you're experiencing so many different service providers that manage to either uplift your experience or, you know, kick it to the ground pretty much. So why we're inviting you to collaborate is that if you look at humans, at your customers, in a bit larger scale, then you will see that providing services together might actually provide a better value. And let me illustrate that with a couple of examples from real life that demonstrate that it's about experience and not about isolated companies. So probably the most known of the three is the collaboration between Nike and Apple, where since early 2000s, they started coming up with gadgets that elevate your sports experiences. So first there was a chip connected to your sneaker in the early days, and then it was a special iPod for somebody who likes running. And then in the end, I think now we are in the age of Apple Watches that are created in special collaboration with Nike. So they kind of collaborate for the same audience, doing the same thing, but they're putting two and two together. Now another one is a little bit more unknown, a little bit more interesting, where you would have somebody who creates toys help NASA to get children interested in space science. So you actually collaborate between very unlikely companies. They found that there is something that is common ground between the two of them, and then they start providing solutions to get kids interested in physics, in space science, and so on. And by the way, this model is actually quite common. Very many game companies, video games, help complex industries to help people learn. For example, there is a collaboration between video games company and medical equipment provider. So jointly they created a video game for doctors to learn how to use medical equipment because it's, you know, safer to learn on a video game than on real humans. So this type of collaborations are quite common. Maybe this is something to look at. And then this is heavy lifting. Pun intended. Lyft is a company that is pretty much like Bolt. And again, Epic is something that is like providing software for hospitals that helps people to manage appointments, book appointments, and to plan kind of doctor visits. And they were facing a very severe problem, of actually two problems. First of all, people show up late to the doctor's appointments, and I'm sure we have all experienced that. That, you know, you're sitting in a queue, being there on time, and then somebody who is late is squeezing in before you, and then, you know, a whole schedule kind of goes to waste. And the another problem was because the hospital that kind of they were experimenting on, it had several campuses, so several buildings in different parts of the city. Patients were coming to the wrong one. You know, it's like you open Google Maps, it sends you to the wrong building of the hospital, and you discover that too late, of course, and so on. So what they did was that they actually created an integration into the booking system that automatically, for the patient, ordered a taxi to pick you up and to take you to the right place in the right time. So they kind of solved it for doctors as well as for customers as well, kind of putting two and two together and looking at the whole journey, not just kind of, you know, going to the doctor, but actually extending the journey to the arrival part as well. So we have many examples like this, where companies that have absolutely nothing in common actually find a touch point that they can both address together. And I think there's a lot of potential here as well, even though, it might look at the first glance that you're coming from very different industries. Somebody is producing medical equipment, somebody is working with some food industry things, and it might seem that it's completely opposite sides of the planet, so to say. But in reality, there might be touch points that are not that evident in the beginning. So hoping that gives you a little bit of the context, like why are we talking about innovation through customers' points of view? So we're zooming out into the journey. And we're inviting you to collaborate in a sense that if it turns out that regardless of the fact that your services are in very different industries, you still have this one problem from customers' point of view that you could address together. You could look at something that is, metaphorically speaking, is at the crossing point of your interests among the three companies. Or you could discover something that is equally new but equally interesting to all of the companies, 2 or 3, however many you team up with. So these are the two options how you could approach this. But these two are to illustrate that it shouldn't be in a way that, one company says that, okay, we have this topic and the other two are just kind of contributing. So it has to be sort of like an equal interest, an equal split, right? Any questions so far? No? All good? Then I'm handing back.
Thank you. So a slight interjection onto how we go about this. What can be also considered as innovation? I'll back up a bit to, I think, what's really key to many of you. It's recognizing this and the sentiment that experience is king. Remember back onto the 5-tiered design thinking process, if you may. For airports, this might be true, and for airports that's particularly tricky because it's governed by multiple vendors. But so is probably your chain of items that you deliver. If it's a physical good, it has a store where it can be picked up. If you buy it online, then there is a delivery done by a courier and so on and so on. Multiple items that you cannot affect. But what you can affect are things surrounding the purchase and everything. So the more you impact the touch points around your service, the easier it becomes to use. Reverting back onto the Apple Music example, it's not the question of whether Apple Music is more profitable or better service than Spotify. It's simply the fact that within the Apple path of using devices, it's much more frictionless than Spotify, for instance. That's their turnkey asset. So companies and services are different in nature, even though they could be perceived to occupy the same space. For us as consumers, Spotify and Apple Music occupy the same space. But for some people, then it might be more frictionless. So it's about this and about the fact that the experience is king. And that is the one driver that I really hope that you kind of keep with you. Now, key question. And here, we'll give you now, because we've been talking straight for 1 hour, 20 minutes at this point. Now, I'm going to give you 3 minutes time to turn to the person sitting next to you. Can be from the same company, can be from a different company. I do not mind. But to think on how can co-creation be helpful in your context right now. And let's limit the context. I want co-creation to be helpful within a span of the rest of the year, until the end of this year, until Christmas or something like that. So with co-creation and with innovation methods, it's very easy to start envisioning too far. I have a tangible example of this. If you visit Helsinki and if you visit the railway station, Opposite the railway station, you will see a building that has a really strange bulge in the side of the building. It's a ledge that protrudes out of the building, and we call the building lovingly makkaratalo, meaning sausage house, because the ledge, looking at from the outside, resembles a giant sausage kind of going about the building. The history of the ledge is super interesting, because the ledge underneath, or just behind the ledge, seen from the street level, used to be a parking lot. So people would drive over there and park their cars. But the ledge was there for a singular reason: to park flying cars. Really. Conceived in the 1960s, it was built like that because pretty soon cars will fly, and it's handy that this building will have the ledge so they can just park in it. So it was built, and it was futuristic as hell, and everyone was super happy. I'm not going to ask a show of hands who has a flying car, but I'm pointing out the fact that with innovation work, it's really easy to be super cheesy and kind of predict that, yeah, let's go too far. When cars will fly, our new service is going to be, no. You're making it relevant by limiting the factor, limiting the time scale. And this is one thing, if I was present in the rest of your program, I would force you constantly, I'm hoping Jana, Lene, everyone else will kind of force you to keep the timelines realistic. I would hope for you to get something out in the span of either 2 or 3 years only to eliminate flying cars and stupid buildings with ledges. To give you a context, now I've given you enough time for this. I'm giving you now 3 minutes to turn to your person next to you. I'm realizing that it's tedious for you people online, but song and dance available while you're doing this. But 3 minutes starting now to turn to your neighbor, discuss how can co-creation be helpful in your context, your work context, by the end of this year. And I will then ask people later. Feel free to start executing. Not your neighbor. I know, for online people, I'm not answering that. I'm just kind of thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, this is just for me. Yeah. And time. People. Awesome. Thank you. Super energized. This was great. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is what I have to do. You three had a heated discussion. Yeah. Do you want to outline a bit on what were you talking about? How could co-creation be helpful in your context towards the end of the year?
We realized that actually we are trying to work all the time on co-creation because we are sports club chain.
Yeah.
And we need to work very close to mostly shopping centers where we are located.
Okay.
How to get there. Also, what we were talking right now, and I already was writing an email about parking of cycle.
Yeah. Cycle parking.
Cycle
Yeah.
parking, and how probably our member gets there, and this journey too. Only starting part we managed.
Yeah. 3 minutes is short time. So I'm just replicating this for the viewers online so that they kind of know what we're addressing here. So for sport clubs or maintenance of for sports club oriented problems, for instance, you started to unravel things like regarding cycle commuting and these kinds of things. Yeah, it's a fast item to kind of start to tackle on. So you got to the point fast. Any other group who wants to decidedly share by their own, or shall I pick one out randomly? Yeah, please do.
I think the main idea what we realized is that cooperation would be important for opening new opportunities. Because, for example, we were discussing that we are a manufacturer company. We are producing skincare products, and already today in the morning we had a nice discussion with ladies from My Fitness, talking about co-creation. How could we cooperate to open new opportunities for each of us?
Yes.
And there are a lot of them.
Yes, thank you. That's a very good sentiment. Co-creation and it's sometimes called cross-pollination between companies. When companies work alone, you tend to see like, these are the problems, I cannot see anything else but these. But then you start to see opportunities. The minute another company comes in, like, we have these kinds of customers, we have these kinds of customers. So it's the cross-working of the two companies that makes it viable. Okay. Does anyone else want to still share, or shall I move forward with the main topics?
Maybe we can.
Yeah, please do.
The problem, it could be cooperation, as we have food production company, and then the farmers could be the fine. And together we will resolve the problem, which we needed the business-to-business customer.
Yeah.
And then
So you could loop in the farmers to work more closely with your end customer's problem. Yeah. That's a nice way to think about co-creation. It's a bit similar answer that I gave the gentleman over there for the B2B context. How do you work? It's not necessarily contacting only your clients or your perspective, but understanding that you can contact your vendors and your customers and make them work together. And this is co-creation. This also gives birth to something new. So the key thing, another key thing that I want you to remember now is to limit the time factor. Because it's really easy to take the design thinking framework, like emphasize and so on, and then let's aim to make a better world in 15 years. And sustainability legislation and everything is going to impact everything, and then we'll be all wearing these funny hats with these antennas because we don't have cell phones. And so you kind of go cheesy because it's too distant, and you need to lose it. You need to have a realistic time frame, and when in the context of the program, someone's going to ask, what's a realistic time frame? I tend to give the same answer. Force yourself onto a time frame when people still are generally using the same mobile phones as they're using nowadays. So this limits your choices of technology, choices of connectivity, choices of accessibility. But to a realistic time frame, to be achievable within a span of 3 to 5 years, you would be still relevant. Because the smartphone is the ubiquitous something. And the next threshold is really difficult to predict. Moving on to the last formal part of the presentation is like covering many of these topics. What's the main directions, main items that you could want to get out, or what we aim for you to get out of this? So this was already touched upon, which made me really happy that someone kind of picked up on this already, or some of you, is that we're going to push you from doing things alone and isolated and with a blindfold on here to creating new ideas, just like this skincare fitness item. It's like already thinking about the positives instead of the negatives. When we dwell on our own organization, our own data, our own products that we do, we tend to think like, okay, well, it sucks in so many ways, and we are a different organization and so on. So we see negatives. But the minute we pull others in, we start to see positives. That's great. And companies are built on positives, not negatives. Of course, you've got to work around reality, but still. Collaborate with someone external to create something of new value. Because this is also very human. If I ask you for a business case for your own product, you will be like, and then you will recite your whatever company mantra that the CEO and their relatives kind of gave you when you entered the company or when you founded it. These are KPIs and key metrics that you accept. I govern my work like this. But the minute you work with someone else, you're actually doing stuff that other people accept. You are forced to open up your business models and the way that you think to someone else. Again, taking a stab at those who work in the manufacturing industries. Who here works with services? Whose main product is some kind of service or the other? Yeah. You could already see from the match between the skincare and the fitness that the minute you, from the manufacturing industry, match with a company who does services, it gets super interesting because the others' revenue generation models are totally different. They probably have things that the manufacturing industry is super envious of. Subscription business model, lucrative. But guess what? For the manufacturing industries, the service model industries are super envious of you who are able to, here's a product, bye-bye, next. So in the sense that it's a one-off thing and you don't have to worry about it so much. You're creating for once KPIs that some other people among you will accept. And this is a good conversation to have. It's healthy for a business to expose it like this. One of my key takeaways to you, do not be worried to talk about your business. Many companies, particularly startups, have this like, I can't talk about it. I can't talk about it, I don't want to talk about it so that you don't steal it. The only industry where I accept this, or any innovation acceleration coach should accept this sentiment, is defense industries. That's the only one. For everyone else, that's like making too much of an importance of your business case. No, be open about it, what you do in the context of this program. Talk to your peers, be open about what you're developing, and you'll realize that the acceleration factor you get out of those conversations is way more important than maintaining corporate secrets. No one wants to copy your models because they're not you. They're not having the unique you that makes you or you that makes you. That's, for businesses, really key. Now, equally for the purposes of this program, I think that innovation work has 3 distinct buckets where it can be put. And this now ties in with the feasibility, desirability, and viability. First is that with whatever it is, with whomever it is that you're doing, you're creating new value. The second is typically that you're escalating or scaling something. And the third one is that you're optimizing a service to be better. Now you could all think of examples of these. Creating new revenue. Mostly when people think about innovation, they think about generating something new. Something totally new. And like we've illustrated together with Jana today, that's not the case. Many times innovation is perceived to be something totally different. It's like Spotify didn't invent music, like said. They just made it more accessible. Innovation provides an excellent way of rethinking how something works or for whom it's useful and how. And optimization, obviously, this is like how to make a thing more accessible, again, in a different way. And to illustrate this, because this is like words on a slide, really silly, let's use an image to kind of convey. Here's an axis for price, and there's an axis for differentiator. And we have, I'm a Finn, so for me, the holy coffee bean means like, okay, it's without this, I do not literally exist or function. But when we take this is fairly cheap and fairly commonplace. And then when we start to refine it into something, we could produce instant coffee to make this like super fast drinkable and get the benefits of coffee fast, right? Yeah, but we get to up the price a bit at the same time. For some of us who don't have the time to individually inspect every coffee bean in the morning to see that it's perfect for our grinding procedure, we could go for that. Go for the fact that let's make it faster. And I'm willing to up the price a bit. Now, refining that further, let's kind of pre-process it so that it becomes filter coffee. And we can up the price again a tiny bit to make it really something that, and this is what Finland drives with, filter coffee, yes. It's the main source of, like said, take away this and we will lose every war. But it's still something else. And then all of this began from the coffee bean, and we can move up in the value chain and realize that, hey, maybe we could have these coffee shops where people could actually buy the coffee ready-made. And we began for 1 cent, and we went to 7 euros. And it's all still coffee. But the perceived value is like, I love the service. I'm here with my startup, with my Starbucks cup, with my name misspelled on it. And in Finland, we have a service in one of the coffee chains where a person pays a monthly retainer of 30 euros, and you can pick as many cups as you want. And on average, people pick 3 cups, but they pay the 40, 30 euros with gusto because I get to be like, I'm on the fast lane. So, perceived value and the realization that actually things differ, obviously. Your services differ. For those of you who have services in the, who deal with services, you can do things differently. You can utilize or rethink the entire chain. But for those in the manufacturing industry, this is particularly interesting. Whether you could do things like this. So, purposes of innovation. Revenue, one thing. How do you do that? How much more new money are you generating into the existing society around you? Why is this important? Well, it exists to make you be able to get your monthly salary, your owners happy, but it also exists to boost the society around you. The more you do this, the better your nation is going to do, the more in better shape your roads are going to be, the better shapes to schools and services and so on and so on. This affects everything around you, because it impacts the GDP, gross domestic product. Escalation or scaling. Obviously, every business leads to this one, the first one. You're reorienting what you're doing. Some of you might be at the precipice of doing this. We need to reorient our business, rethink how we do that. And some of you are at this. How do we do the thing that we do? Because we do it in our product is good, we just need to rethink on how do we distribute it. You will be using design thinking for this. So the 3 core purposes, and it's almost like feasibility, viability, desirability. So, takeaway here. You have the 3 lenses, the feasibility, desirability, viability, and you have these. You're creating new value, or you're scaling or escalating or changing something, or then you're optimizing a process. These are roughly the directions that you can take. And within the constraints of this program, I hope that this is kind of enough for you to keep with you. Any thoughts or comments this far? Okay. This theory part, for my part, is done. I'm a firm believer in the fact that these sessions do not exist to kind of give you a very detailed way of this is how you will run it, and so on and so on. But to give you a spark so that you can Google up the right things, and so that you can challenge the coach in the right way, and already armed with the right kinds of questions and directions that make it easier for the coach to help you. This is super, super crucial. So to kind of, no one is asking you to be professional in design thinking on a get-go. But maybe what we're doing is giving you an inkling that in 2 months' time, you will be trying to solve problems that some organizations have not been able to solve in 10 years. Because within the constraints of this program, you get to be more agile. You get to be more nimble, and you get to also play a little bit of pretend. Let's imagine that we had scores of money, and then not necessarily always the CEO is here to kind of tell you that you don't have it. One thing is missing from this presentation, well, probably a lot of things, but later on, through your coach, you'll get my email address. And that's crucial. Why? Is that I will be actually super delighted to hear from some of you later on during the program if you have a question that you think that I would be fruitful for. And I'll promise to try and answer it in some way or the other so that it's helpful to you. Because acceleration is about people. And this is all about acceleration. Keep that DVI graph in mind. The point of doing all of this is that you're able to do services and goods faster than before. And this is at the heart of the program. And for that, I say, for my part, thank you. And we have additional questions, I think.
Yes, we do. We have a few questions from our viewers. So in the beginning, you mentioned those 3 core... Jana, yes, definitely. You can join this part as well. In the beginning, you mentioned 3 core problems that organizations encounter. One of those were detachment. And then you proceeded to talk about design thinking. And the question from the viewer is, does design thinking help with this problem as detachment? And adding to detachment, he also mentioned profit and longevity.
Yeah, it does actually address this. And since we have time, I will, because I have an example of this. In Norway, their railway system was widely criticized for being super inefficient and also not able to actually address the problems that people were facing. a consultancy started to work with them in this sort of manner, like design thinking oriented manner, where people actually seem to taken to face the problems. And one thing that they did was making sure that whenever there was a problem in the main railway station, on top of which actually the headquarters of the railway company is located, the top management would have this siren that would go off, and they made a deal that whenever there's a problem, the siren would go off, the top management would put like these yellow vests on and go over there and also investigate together with the people on what's wrong. Sounds very cheesy, right? You're making gazillion billion euros from running railways, and you as the CEO are then running in the railways, solving problems. Sounds inefficient, right? No, it was not. Actually, it began an avalanche of changes within the company when they realized that, are we really forcing people to do this? And this made them rethink the way they do their business calculus. And currently, nowadays, after several years, I think 10 years of change, they are perceived to be super customer friendly because they realized how the daily pains are like. So that really addresses detachment. You just need to do it on a high enough level to kind of get like a mandate to do that. It's really true.
Okay, I do hope for our viewers that that answered the question as well. And continuing with design thinking and companies that maybe in the human resources are not that big, smaller ones. So how often should the companies go through design thinking process, and who of those companies, if we consider this human resources, who of those companies should participate in such process?
That's also a very, very good question. Because basically, for HR in particular, what I urge functions like that to do is examine their internal processes, lay out the key processes that they have. Let's say that they have 4 to 5 different key processes. We're hiring someone, we're might be firing someone, we're doing company internal communications, and I don't know, let's add something else. So these are like 3 core things that I can easily identify. Lay these processes out and start to work with you as an internal customer. Emphasize on all the other touch points that you have and redesign those processes using design thinking. And that's how you become like an HR that works in a new way. This is how I would approach it. So I wouldn't give it a time frame of how often do you need to change something. I would give it like a go-ahead of rethink how you work, how you govern your work.
If I may jump in on this.
Yeah.
I think it's a very valid question. I actually remember one of the customers where we started this, let's say, evaluation process of how customer-centric they are, and we introduced the framework to them. And then somebody approached me in the coffee break, and they were like, excuse me, is this design thinking thing now mandatory for everybody? I was like, thinking in general is kind of very optional thing, but it's like, you choose. But anyway, jokes aside, I think when I try to introduce design thinking framework to companies that do their own thing on a daily basis, the analogy that I try to create is like, it's a skill pretty much like project management skill. This is something that everybody obtains during pretty much any education that you get, right? So it's in IT, it's in food industry, you obtain the skill of project management regardless of where you work. So I think the end goal, and of course this is not an easy task to achieve in the end, but I think the end goal for any organization could be that it's a skill that everybody sort of has in their back pocket, and that they recognize the situations in which either the full process or bits and pieces of it, because this is also very important, because once you use the framework and once you get how it's applied, you can actually break it apart and kind of apply when necessary in different stages. So I think that, like, if looking at the kind of long perspective of adopting and maturing, that's kind of the ideal state. However, I fully recognize that it's not as easily done as I just described. So,
One part of it is that for what I would like to emphasize with design-oriented methods is that they were once described that they're just like a virus that is super contagious. If you start doing that in an organization and you do it well, let's begin from the HR example. The minute you start to do that in HR, I'm betting that the adjacent services will be like the admin people and the financial people. How the hell did you do that? And they are going to be super interested in how you redesigned or redefined your workplace. And therefore it spreads. Take note, all of you, if depending on the size of your workplace, if you utilize these things here, it is contagious. Particularly for those of you, and this is most easy for those of you with B2C focus. It's not at all irrelevant for B2B. But if for B2C, this is like super, pretty soon everyone in your workplace will work in the manner that's kind of customer-centric. And this is to say that design thinking and customer-centric, they are kind of equal in terms of terms. So choose which one do you want to use. For some, design thinking is like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. But I do want to talk about customer centricity.
And I just listening to you, I remembered two things actually. First was Michael Jackson's quote, I'm starting with the man in the mirror. So basically, if you're thinking about design thinking, think about yourself first, as you mentioned, that about HR things. And second was that one of our growth program alumni actually also came with know-it-all feeling to the program and came with thinking of how to change the market and how to be such like cool kids on the block. But then they started from the inside again as well and completely changed and increased their productivity actually at the end of the program.
but it's a hard sell, isn't it? Because if you start with, you have to change yourself, I don't think we would have that many people in the audience.
Yeah. So no one wants to hear that, and no one wants to kind of feel at this point that, I went there for corporate therapy. Because that's what it kind of turns into.
But to honestly to see that the growth program kind of is a short therapy session.
Don't tell them yet.
Tell them not yet.
Yes.
Okay, that's a surprise.
Yes.
And kind of finish your question thinking about SMEs and innovations. How for a small company, relatively small companies, but established ones, how to innovate and implement innovation methods if we are short on resources, we don't want to lose resources, and we don't want to make mistakes.
Yeah, this is the billion-dollar question. It's been asked by the audience already, and it's akin to the fox and hare problem. Does the fox ever catch the hare? Not often enough, because the hare is running for its life and the fox only for its dinner. Small companies have to do this. But you have to get it right. Because if you are short on resources, then the key question is, can we do this? Like you said, that's the billion-dollar question. But my counterpoint to this is that what happens if you don't do this? If you don't pull the customers in to a certain extent, embrace co-creation to a certain extent, you risk the fact that someone else will. Someone else will form an approach or a company doing things the way that you said back in 2024 that they should be done and takes up your position, kind of steals that away. So, and it's not an all-in thingy. You can do this with a marginal effort first and see if it fits, if the shoe fits to your organization and in which way, and therefore start to accelerate.
And actually,
there's no clear answer to that.
And actually, there's 2 points in this question that I think both are equally important and deserve kind of to be pointed out. So first of all, the resource topic, which I think is quite relevant, but as Jussi's example showed, this kind of lack of resources or hunger is typically the best motivator. So if we look at crisis times, this is usually the time of biggest innovations actually taking place, because you're kind of forced to act quickly, otherwise it will be a very sad ending for everybody. So I would say that the lack of resources is not the blocker for the smaller companies. However, there is one kind of show breaker or deal breaker for the smaller companies that tends to hide behind the resource factor. And that is the fact that startups and kind of smaller companies that have not grown into corporations, because in corporations, the democracy principles and discussion and governance is the thing that is quite common or socially acceptable, so to say. In smaller companies, the decision-making process is yet in the stage where it's the owner or the founder is the key driver of the whole business. And as we discussed earlier, innovations or businesses, they start from ideas and not from solving problems. And this is the thing that I find in smaller businesses might turn out to be the roadblock that can easily be hidden or kind of justified by the lack of resources. So we don't have time to do this. We are on schedule. Innovation is great, but we have a fiscal year to close, which is an ongoing story. But the actual kind of reasoning or the actual motivation to do or not to do things might be in some other decision processes.
For those of you in slow industries or slow companies or slow surroundings, make a daring leap and turn sentences into real life things. So then go back to the CEO and say that, so what you're saying is that we're too busy to look at numbers, so we can't innovate new products, right? Be a little bit pointy. Make them realize that a tiny bit of effort should be directed initially onto someone at the company examining new ways to do things. That has never hurt anyone. But what hurts people more is like when someone says that, I have an idea, let's blow everything apart. No one will say yes. But begin with a tiny part and then you'll get there, because then you'll also get to see if the evidence is enough for you to kind of change the company or change your surroundings. It's the HR example in large corporations. Begin with something. So how do you eat an elephant? One piece at a time. Begin from somewhere. Don't think too big to begin with.
Perfect. Then let's finish talking about elephants and food. With that, we will conclude to go further on to lunch. And I will thank you once again for giving this very interesting and entertaining talk. And then, don't want to call it a lecture, but let's call it a lecture theory-wise. And I'm going to switch now to Latvian. Paldies visiem, kas pievienojās. Paldies visiem, kas pievienojās un klausījās, skatījās, kā arī uzdeva jautājumus. Neaizmirstiet, ka programmas ietvaros mums ir 4 šādas lekcijas. Katra notiek katru 2. nedēļu. Tāpēc arī aicināšu pievienoties 19. septembrī, kad atkal Jana mums novadīs vēl vienu lekciju par lietotāju virzītām inovācijām. Kā arī priecāšos, ja atstāsiet savas atsauksmes mentī, lai mēs zinātu, kā uzlabot tālāk. Vēlreiz paldies un tiekamies aiznākamnedēļ.